we just spent some time solving by square roots method and going through our homework. Now we're going to start a second method. Now, I want to talk to you about factoring. We spent a couple of days doing nothing but factoring. Actually, I think we spent 4 days. We talked about factoring trinomials. We talked about factoring GCF. We factored dots, which is difference of two squares. And we factored the harder trinomials, where you grabbed the whiteboards and you did inners and outers, and you had to do some trial and error. Try different factors until you got them in the right place. All of that's going to come back. I want to talk to you about factoring out the GCF. When you do GCF, you have no C term. So if I go in descending order, some number A in front of x squared, plus some number B in front of x, plus some number C at the end, and of course we do want these equal to 0, these first few problems are not going to have any C. Okay? So it's different from the ones we just did, so that's why we're using a different method. When all is said and done, you're going to have multiple ways to solve some of these equations, and you'll get to pick whichever one you think is the best one. So I'm going to guide you through as much as I can. Now we're using something called the zero product property. When I talk about the word product, what I'm saying is I'm multiplying here. If I multiply two things and the answer turns out to be 0, the only way I can get an answer of 0 is if there was a 0 somewhere used in the multiplying. It could either be 0 times some number A, or it could be A times some number 0. It could be the first one 0, or it could be what? The last one is 0. So if I'm multiplying two things and the answer is 0, I have two possibilities, which actually confirms what we've been talking about. You can have two answers. You can have what? One answer, or you could have 0 answers. So let's just jump in. Our strategy changes. I have a box here. Do you have a box up in the corner of your notes? Yes. It is a different strategy, so there's a different approach. In this problem, I'm not going to solve for x squared. This time I'm going to make sure my equation is equal to 0. In other words, everything's on one side, nothing is on the other. Okay? Everything gets moved. So we're going to factor, we're going to split it, then we're going to solve for two answers, and then we're going to okay, number one, x squared plus 4x equals 0. Now, what is in common between x squared and 4x? X. So I want to factor out x. Put your GCF out front. When you do GCF, you're going to factor it out, and you're going to have one set of parentheses. One set of parentheses. So if I'm doing GCF factoring, it's one set of parentheses. I still have equal 0. What's going to be left inside my parentheses? Because this is why we practiced. Okay, x from, remember it's like dividing out an x, which is subtracting little numbers. X from x squared leaves me with 1x, right? Plus, take away x from 4, what happens? I'm only left with plus 4. Does everybody remember? So everything we've done on the left is something we've been doing early last week. Now, we're up to the new part. I am looking for how many answers? Up to as many as 2. Okay? Could be 2, 1, or 0. It says split between the factors. Split between the factors. So I'm going to split. My factors are, I actually have 0, which is one factor, multiplied by x plus 4, which is the second factor, and the answer equals 0. Now, then it says what? Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So, first factor is x. Pull x down. X, set it equal to 0. There's nothing to solve. So my first answer is, guess what? 0.
Wow.
0. All right. My second answer, pull x plus 4 out of parentheses. Set that little equation equal to 0. Now I need to get x by itself, so how do I get rid of plus 4? Subtract 4 from both sides, which is the same thing as moving the 4 over here. And x turns out to equal negative 4. 0, subtract 4 would make a negative 4 answer. There's two answers in the whole wide world that would make this thing equal 0, and those are 0. All right, just to show that these two answers are the only two answers that work, I'm going to go back and I'm going to grab my two numbers here. My first answer that should work would be what? The 0 would be x, right? So I'm going to take 0 and square. I did. And then plus 4 times x, which is plus 4 times the number. The first answer is 0. That answer should give me 0. What's the second number in the whole wide world that also makes this equation equal 0? -4. So up here I'm going to put parentheses, -4. I always like to insert when I evaluate with parentheses, squared plus 4 times -4. And that answer also equals 0. No, this case 0 is not positive or negative, but it's going to be two numbers. Nope. In this case, I only have the -4. I don't have a positive. Okay? So, if I understand what this means, on a graph, where does this thing cross the x-axis? It crosses at what two numbers? 0, which is right here in the middle, and 1, 2, 3, 4. The parabola crosses at 0 and 4. So I have two different numbers. This is not like what we did last time. It's not plus or minus. Oops, sorry. Should be negative. Glad you guys fixed that. Caught my mistake. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Let's go to number 2. I'll get you guys in a minute. Number 2. Do you have anything in common between 2x squared minus 16x? 2 and an x. So I'm going to factor GCF again. When I factor GCF, I have one set of parentheses. Factor out 2x, one set of parentheses. I still have equals 0 because now I'm solving an equation. What would I have in parentheses? What? What numbers would I have? X minus 8. We did GCF factoring multiple days. So remember, it's ds. I'm dividing by 2, take away an x. Divide by 2, take away an x, and I put what's left here and here. So we've done our GCF factoring. What's the next step? Split between the factors. So I'm going to split right in front of my parenthesis. Actually, physically draw a line right on your paper. Did you draw that line on your paper? Now what do? Set each factor equal to 0. So take 2x equal to 0. I don't need 2x, I need just x. But even if I divide out the 2, what's any number divided by, or 0 divided by any number? 0. So my first answer is also a 0. What's my second answer going to be? Take what's in parentheses, pull it out. You're right. X minus 8 equals 0. Add 8 to both sides. It is positive 8. So you've kind of figured out that what you have in parentheses comes out as opposite sign. All right, so if I put this on a graph, it would be 1 and 8, or excuse me, 0 and 8. That graph crosses at two places at 0 and positive 8. What's wrong with example 3? It does not say equal 0. So I need to make sure it says equal 0. Nope. What can I need to do with 12x? Now, if I divide, I would have 1, actually. Not yet. If I bring 12x over here, I actually want to subtract it. If I take 12x and subtract 12x, I end up with 12x's minus 12x's would leave me with 0. Here I cannot add 4x squared minus 12x because that's two different terms. So 4x squared minus 12x. Okay. Do I have a GCF? Okay. Shh. When I moved 12x to the other side, when I moved it over here, it went negative. Okay. That's because I subtracted 12x from both sides, so I have 4x squared minus 12x. 4x is a common factor. They both will divide by 4, and I can take away 1x. Divide by 4, take away 1x. What will I have in my parentheses if I divide out a 4 and take away 1x from each one? X, subtract 3. X, subtract 3. Split down the middle. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So I'm going to set 4x equal to 0 Even when I divide out 4, x turns out to be 0. Okay? If I take x minus 3 equal to 0, pull it out of parentheses and move the 3 over, I end up with x equals. All right, let's move on to part C. I got it part C, or it's the next part on this page of notes. We're still factoring. However, if you'll look now, we actually have 3 parts. So we actually have what? Trinomials. We have some number with front of x squared maybe. We have a b number with x, and we also have a number at the end. And again, this makes it an equation because it has an equals in it. All right, still using the zero product property, but now that I have a trinomial, I can factor trinomials into how many sets of parentheses? 2. So I'm looking for 2 sets of parentheses. What multiplies to be 24, so where you can remember your X puzzle as an organizer. What multiplies to give you 24, it adds to be negative 11. It is 8 and 3. Now, it's going to be x and x equals 0. I have to squeeze that in there. Here's the question. What kind of 8 and what kind of 3? Because it has to add to be negative. It had to be negative 8 and negative 3. So it's x minus 8 and x minus 3 equals 0. Okay? Nope. Now keep in mind, we still have to do the same thing we just mentioned, so I have to what? Split between the factors. I still have 1 factor in the first parenthesis, multiplied by the second factor in the second set of parentheses. So I still have something times something equal 0. So either 0 has to come from the first set of parentheses or 0 is going to have to come from the second. So we still do the same strategy between my factors. This time I'm going to split it right down the middle between the parentheses. Okay? Take what's in parentheses out, x minus 8, set that individually equal to 0. How would you get x by itself? I would add 8 to the left and add 8 to the right. And my first answer would be x equals positive 8. Take the second parenthesis, x minus 3. Pull that out of parenthesis. Set that equal to 0. So I would add 3 to both sides. X is equal to positive 3. What does this answer mean, guys? What does this answer mean? It means when I'm looking at my parabola crosses at what? Well, positive 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It crosses at positive 3 and positive 8. I have 2 different numbers, so this parabola is shifted over. It's now on the positive side. So we've seen parabolas be, exactly equal, negative 4 and positive 4, negative 3, positive 3. We've seen them now shift to be 0 and 3, 0 and 4. This one happens to be 3 and 8. So they can cross anywhere across the x-axis. That's what our solutions mean. Where does that parabola cross the x-axis? What's wrong with example 2?
Oh, it doesn't equal 0.
It does not equal 0. So 15 needs to move. How do I get rid of 15 on that side and move it over here? I have to subtract 15. And I'm going to subtract 15, and I'm going to add 15 at the end, or I'm going to place the negative 15 at the end. It does not have an x, so I don't add it to 2x. It doesn't have an x squared, so I don't add it to x squared. So I'm going to end up with a trinomial, x squared plus 2x, which was already on that side. Now I'm going to bring minus 15 from the other side, and now it should say equal 0. That's my goal, is I brought 15 over. When I brought it over, it went opposite signs. Everybody see it went from positive 15 over there to negative 15 over here? That's a trinomial. Can I factor trinomials? How many sets of parentheses? 2. X and x. Guys, what multiplies to give 15? Negative 15, actually. That's going to add, or in this case, what? This is going to subtract to be what? Positive 2. So make a list. What multiplies give 15? 1 times 15, and I think 3 times 5 is the only thing. So which one's it got to be? It's got to be a 3 and a 5. Now what are my signs going to be?
No, 3 is going to be negative.
There you go. The sign of the middle wins the sign of the bigger number, or the bigger number wins the sign. So it has to be positive with 5 and what? Negative with 3. So negative 3, positive 5. That's not my final answer. I'm going to split down the middle, and then x minus 3 equals 0, x plus 5 equals 0. My two answers are positive 3, because I move it over, it moves positive, and this one becomes negative 5, because when I move it over. So you're right. Whatever's in the parenthesis comes out to opposite sign. Everybody feel good about that one? If I go to a graph, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 5. Okay, I have a parabola that crosses at negative 5 and positive 3. Are you writing these notes down? Okay. Let's keep going. Example 3. What's wrong with example 3? It does not equal 0. Exactly. I need to move everything to one side. Okay. What do I add 4 to? Do I add it to x squared? Do I add it to 6x? Or do I add it to 5? So if I move it over there, I'm going to add 4 to this side. I'm going to add 4 to this side. So I end up with x squared plus 6x plus 9. Who's got this factored already?
I do.
Okay, what'd you get? X and x. What multiplies give 9 that adds to be 6? 3 and 3. What kind of 3s?
Oh, it's plus 3 plus.
Has to be a positive 3 added to a positive 3 to get positive 6. Okay. Now this one is actually easy to solve, but I have to understand what's going on with my answer. So this turns out to be x plus 3 equals 0, which actually is me what? Negative 3. Isn't this the same thing? So this answer is also what? So instead of having two different answers, they both turn out to be what? The same thing. So guys, this one, might want to write my big note to yourself, this one only has what? What does that look like on a graph? I'm going to come over here, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Okay. It comes down, touches at negative 3, and turns right back up. It only touches one time because it only has one x-intercept. Does that make sense? Sketch that for yourself so you know what that means when you see it. That's what I want you to, by the time you see this multiple times, that's what it means. One solution, two parentheses turn out to be just the same. Okay, let's keep going. Example 4 coming up, right? What do I do with example 4? I need to bring 5x over here, and I'm going to actually subtract 5x from both sides. And when I bring 20 over here, there's nothing to subtract 20 from, so it's actually going to go at the very end. So I'm actually going to subtract 20. By the time I subtract from both sides, I'm going to have 0 over there.
Yes, you are.
What am I going to end up with on the left? Okay, first thing I look for, I notice there's a 2 in the front, so this may have a GCF.
Oh.
I don't see one, though. I don't know there is a number that goes into a 2, that goes into 3, that goes into what? 20. Okay? So this is going to take some trial and error. How do I factor 2x squared? That's 2x's times 1x's. There is only one way to get 2x squared. Okay, now I've got to factor the last term. How do you get negative 20 or 20? 1 times 20, 2 times 10, or 4 times 5. So which ones do we want to check first? Usually you check the two factors that are smaller or closer together. I'd probably check the 4 and the 5. Let's just see. What if I put the 4 and the 5 here? Remember, am I subtracting or adding to get the middle? I'm going to be what? I'm going to be subtracting to get 3. It works. If I do outers, I get 10x. If I do inners, I get 4x. 10x and 4x actually subtract to be 6x. That's not it. Okay? So I need to flip my numbers. Let's switch places. Isn't this what we did a couple days ago with the whiteboards? So let's put the 4 here and the 5 here. Okay, that's 5x. What's 2x times 4? 8x. Does 5x and 8x subtracted give 3? Yes. Yes. Okay. Now, the bigger factors win the sign. Bigger factors win the sign. So the bigger factor is, actually 8 is bigger, so it needs to be what? Positive, and 5 needs to be negative. So I'm going to give the 5 the negative, and 4 needs to be positive.
You're not done.
I'm not done. That inners and outers helped me confirm that I finally got the right combination. I'm still going to split down the middle, and this time my answers are not as obvious. Okay, 2x minus 5 set equal to 0. I'm going to have to solve this because it's not positive 5. Okay, if I move the 5 over there, it becomes what? Plus 5. I get 2x is equal to positive 5. I have to divide out the 2. What's 5 divided by 2? I think it's 2.5. So sure enough, my first answer turns out to be a decimal, 2.5, which is totally possible. I can find 2.5 on the number line. The other one is pretty easy. What's my second answer? Negative 4. So you got to be careful. You can still solve, but if you have an extra number in the front, don't forget to divide that. That number's always going to be on the bottom, because that's the last thing you do is divide out by whatever's in front of x. I have people every time miss number 5, and it's the easiest one on the whole page. It's already factored. All you have to do is just split it and figure out the answers. X plus 3 equals 0, which means x is what? X minus 6 is 0, so what? Too many times I get kids that want to multiply it back. In other words, they want to go backwards instead of just knowing what they've got. All right. Do you have to do example 6 by factoring, or do you recognize it as a dots problem? It is dots, which means it does factor x and x, 7 and 7, plus and because there is no middle term. Split it. My first answer is what? Negative 7 and positive 7. And this one can be solved, but I'd rather you solve it the way we did yesterday. This one's easier to solve by what? It's easier to solve by what? By square roots method. Don't ring the bell, and I still got time. Square to the left gets me x plus 3 out from underneath there. Square to the right. What's the square to 4? 2. Don't forget what? When you take square root, the very next step's got to be what? Plus or minus. Your homework's on the back of your sheet. To finish this one, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I'm going to look at positive 2 minus 3, which is negative 1. I'm going to look at negative 2 minus 3, which is negative 5. This parabola crosses at negative 1 and negative 5.